Hello, this is the Mushroom Wizard, and I'm returning once again with a presentation regarding the mushrooms found in Saskatchewan and the ways in which we go about identifying those mushrooms and picking those mushrooms. So, this can be considered a bit of a companion piece to the other presentation I did called Spring Mushrooms of Saskatchewan, in that it includes mushrooms that are often overlooked by mushroom pickers during that time because they're more focused on things like chanterelles, pine mushrooms, honey mushrooms are a big one in Saskatchewan. So let's get started. These are autumn mushrooms of Saskatchewan. So the genre that we will be looking at are Clitocybe, Clitopilus, Flammulina, Leucoagaricus, and Liophyllum. And again, what to expect in this presentation? Well, this presentation will be primarily about agaric mushrooms. And when I say agaric, if you recall, mushrooms with a stipe, a cap, and gills underneath the cap producing their spores. So this is about agaric mushrooms that occur during the autumn season and are often overlooked by mushroom pickers. Also, I should point out that the mushrooms found in this presentation are not for beginner mushroom pickers necessarily. These are more advanced mushrooms that you would want to be looking for if you are already familiar with the ways in which to make reference points between what you think it is and what it is, and to make appropriate comparisons, and as well as being familiar with the common toxic species that they could potentially look like. So, let's get started here. The first mushroom we're going to look at is a very common mushroom in Saskatchewan. This is the clouded agaric, Clitocybe nebularis. You'll want to look for this one around mid-August through September and beginning of October. So the cap is various shades of gray swirled together. If you've ever looked at a cloudy sky that's all clouds, it's not just universal flat white. It's more various swirled grays. And that's what you're going to see in this mushroom. It is quite a beautiful mushroom to look at. So it is broadly convex or campanulate. If you remember, campanulate refers to a shape reminiscent of a bell in a bell tower. And then when I say broadly, I mean it's a very wide mushroom. So these do become flat with age and then shallowly depressed. The cuticle is smooth. So if you run your finger across it, it will have a smooth feel to it. The margin is also smooth and it's turned or rolled downwards. And then this can be a very large mushroom. It can grow up to about 7 inches in diameter, though not usually that large. Here we have a size reference for you. Looks like they're using, for comparison, a mushroom knife in this photo. It's a very nice thing to have. It has an appropriate blade for cutting stipes, and on the end it also has a brush for brushing off the dirt. You can find them online. The gills are white, turning cream with age. They are adnate or decurrent. So if you recall, adnate is where it just touches the stipe. Decurrent is where it suddenly begins to go down the stipe, even just a short ways. And you'll find this is often the case with adnate mushrooms that develop a cup shape in the middle of the cap and turn their margin upwards, such as this one is doing. The gills are close together. Short gills between those gills are frequent, and this produces cream spores. You'll also notice there the margin of the mushroom, even though they are upwards, the very end of the margin is still curling downwards. Here is that cream spore print. The stipe is white to off-white, sometimes with a beige streaking, which you can see in the photos here. They are solid, clavate to bulbous, and you're seeing these very clavate mushrooms here. There is a central attachment to the stipe. They are fibrous. You can see that they've got these longitudinal grooves going upwards there. They're up to about 4 inches high and 2 inches wide. So the widest point would be at the base. These are saprobic mushrooms. They are terrestrial. They grow off of leaf litter from deciduous trees. So look for this one in the mixed woodlands of Saskatchewan primarily. These range from solitary to gregarious. Sometimes they will form rings. Often I see them forming a ring around a tree even. And these are found late summer through fall. In terms of their edibility, these are widely consumed in Europe, but I consider them to be poor edibles. First off, they taste like garbage. They don't taste very good, at least to me. Subjectively, they taste kind of not sour, but almost like chemically. They have a high potential for people to have allergies, so a lot of people do react strongly when they try to eat this mushroom. It smells like sickly sweet fruit. If you can imagine that, not in a good way, right? Like in like a really, really poorly made Christmas cake kind of thing. These are for advanced mushroom pickers as well. So here's why these are for more advanced pickers. Cladocybe nubularis is on the left, Trichiloma pardonum. The tiger knight is on the right, and it is a mushroom that can make you very, very sick. Here we have Cladocybe nubularis on the left, and then Tricholomaterium on the right. Tricholomaterium is still widely consumed, but it can cause a condition in people called rhabdomyolysis that can be fatal. Cladocybe nubularis on the left here. On the right, we have the livid pink gill, Entoloma sinuatum, which is a mushroom that can make you very, very sick and potentially even kill you. Let's move on to the next group of species here. These mushrooms are collectively called enoki. They have other names like the winter mushroom. They're also called velvet foots. So these are different species of Flammulina. On the left, we have a very common Flammulina velotypes. This is the one that's the most well known. As well, it is also a name that is used to describe numerous other enoki species that are have similar attributes, but are just not themselves given full names, probably just numbers, species numbers. In the middle, we have Flammulina populicola, which is very common in Saskatchewan. And in the center, we have Flammulina fenni. So the cap is quite variable throughout. So it's brown to red to orange to yellow with Flammulina velotypes. It's beige to tan to brown with Flammulina populicola. Then cream to peach to this kind of luminous pink color for Flammulina fenni. They will be darker in the center, as you can see occurring there with that cap. And then sometimes there will be multiple colors present with the lightest color around the margin. You can see there it's got almost like this kind of reddish black, and then sort of reddish orange, and then yellowish orange there on the margin. These are convex caps that flatten with age, and they flatten very quickly. The cap may become distorted, and here's why: because these clump together in large groupings. So if you can imagine like 7 or 8 caps trying to occupy a space of maybe 4 inches, and they're growing at the same rate, those caps press together, and they can really become strange in terms of their development. The cuticle is smooth, so no raised scales or anything, but when you run your finger across it, if it's moist out or wet, or if there's been a recent rain, they'll be sticky and slimy. If it's dry, they'll be kind of tacky, and often they get things stuck to them as a result. One of the things that you commonly see in this species, when they're clumping together in large amounts, they'll continue to grow younger ones underneath the older ones. And then after a period of time, when the initial caps have fallen away, everything underneath will have white spores stuck to it. So sometimes that can be mistaken for mold. I've done that myself. It is in fact just white spores. The margin is smooth, sometimes becoming wavy or torn with age, which is what you can expect from a thinner fleshed mushroom. These grow up to about 2 inches across. Here's a size reference for you. So the gills are off-white, becoming beige or yellow with age. They're adnate, so they reach across and touch that stipe. They're close together or crowded, depending on the species or the locale. Short gills between the gills are frequent, and this produces white spores, which is one of the ways you can ID this mushroom over some of its lookalikes that we will look at. There's the spore print for you. They have a very heavy spore deposit. They produce a lot of spores, and those spores are white. Often if they're reaching maturity or they're already open, you can just look around on the mushrooms themselves to see if you can find any of those spores. But spore print never hurt anybody. So the stipe is another way to ID this mushroom. It is off-white to beige, darkening significantly towards the base as it grows older. And sometimes or not sometimes, it'll be kind of like a blackish that it darkens to, but with an olive or a green hue. So that's kind of a unique quality to them. It's hard to see in this picture. In real life, when you're looking at them, you'll see that green more prevalent. They are cylindrical, so of equal width throughout. And often many stipes will fuse together into a single basal mass, as you see these ones doing. As well, since this often grows out the side of wood, it will curve upwards as the caps try to reach the sun or the sunlight. The stipes are velvety at the base, and that sometimes disappears with age. They are solid and fibrous, and they form a central attachment to the cap. And they grow up to about 3 inches high and a half-inch wide at most. These are saprobic, so they are found growing directly upon rotting hardwoods with Flammulina velotypes and F. However, Flammulina populicola, as the name suggests, only grows on poplar species. And that is very common. I see them in Saskatchewan growing off of poplar stumps in areas or yards where they've been cut. These may appear terrestrial if growing upon wood that is buried underneath the ground that is rotting. They are usually found in very large clumps, like you see here. And these appear in the late fall. So you can start looking for these in September and into October. Often after it snows and melts for the first time as winter's approaching, you will still see them appearing. As well, they do sometimes appear very early spring, often before the snow has finished melting. In terms of the edibility, these are choice mushrooms. They are used extensively in Asian cuisines, and they are great for dehydrating or for turning into a powder to use as a soup base. Cultivated versions, you do see them in the grocery store, called enoki or enokitai, or however that's pronounced, I don't know. But they're growing in the dark and underground, and without the presence of the sun, they look very different than what we see in the wild. On the right-hand side, that is a cultivated bunch of mushrooms there, a bunch of enoki. And it is the same species, but without the sun, you have these very long stipes and very small caps at the top. And it's lacking the expansive coloration. So wild versions, in my opinion, are better. They have a lot more vitamin D3 as well. And these are a mushroom, when you pick them in the wild at least, that are for advanced mushroom pickers. And here's why. On the right-hand side there, we have the sulfur tuft, Hyphiloma fascicular, which is very, very toxic. It can kill you. Flammulina on the left. You should look them up. A great way to tell the difference is a spore print, as Hyphiloma fascicular has these violet-black spores versus the white spores. Again, Galerina marginata, the funeral bell, kills people. It has dark brown spores, whereas Flammulina species always have white spores, which is what you want. The next mushroom we're going to be looking at is the white dapperling. This is Leucoagaricus leucophytes, a very common mushroom in cities. So white to off-white in terms of its cap coloration. And it sometimes develops in the central area there a hint of tan as it ages. When it's young, it is surprisingly spherical in its shape. It does have a partial veil, but the partial veil is almost underneath the margins of the cap, which in and of themselves almost touch the stipe. And we'll see a picture of that shortly. This mushroom then becomes convex and it flattens out with age. It has a smooth cuticle, often with tiny flattened scales in the center. Every now and then you will see those flattened scales reach down to the margins. It has a smooth or appendiculate margin, and if you recall, appendiculate is just fragments left over from the partial veil. And these can get quite big. They can grow up to about 5 inches across, but usually you'll see them around 2 to 3 inches. Here is a size reference for you. At the very bottom there, that mushroom, you can see how spherical that top is. It's not even really convex, it's more of a globe, and then with a veil that is almost underneath those margins. And then in the middle, you see how there's a whole lot of that flattened scaling going on in that cap. So the gills are white to off-white, sometimes with a hint of cream when past maturity. Don't be looking for that hint of cream to tell you that this is a mushroom that isn't toxic, because that's not a good way to tell the difference. The gills are free. You can see that very clearly here. You see that sort of ring around the stipe. The short gills are present. There's not a huge amount of them, but they are there. And this is covered by a small yet very thick partial veil when young, and it produces white spores. Here's a white spore print for you. The stipe is white to off-white. It is bulbous. It becomes hollow with age, and there is a central attachment to the cap. And this mushroom grows up to about 5 inches high and 2 inches wide, and you can see very well the bulb there at the ends of those stipes. The annulus is fragile. It is wide in terms of height, but not so much in terms of width, and it often falls off or is absent. This is a saprobic mushroom. It is terrestrial. This is very common during shaggy mane season. You'll often find them growing in the same areas, and that's on lawns or grasslands. These are found in late summer through to fall. And then, yeah, sometimes you'll only find one. Other times you'll find a bunch. They're a good mushroom to eat. They have a high allergy potential. For myself, I have developed an allergy to these to some extent. They make my mouth kind of numb. They also can bioaccumulate pesticides and herbicides. And, you know, if you taste something that's been growing on someone's lawn and they used Roundup, you'll know it'll taste like junk, and it could make you sick. So these are for advanced mushroom pickers. Here's why. On the left, we have our white dapperling. On the right, we have Amanita bisporigera, the destroying angel. They don't call it that because it's nice and angelic. It literally destroys your liver and kidneys. This is one of the most toxic species known. The resemblance is very superficial. It is simply another white mushroom. So both of these being all white mushrooms, if you're brand new to this, you could mistake that. If you are brand new to this, you probably shouldn't be picking white dapperlings, period, until you're better able to determine through other characteristics what you're looking at beyond just color. For instance, that destroying angel has a vulva. It has a very skirt pendant-like annulus, and it has a very different cap that has some patches and stuff on it. And the stipe is very different there too. You can see how shaggy it is. Moving on. This here is the yellow stainer that it's being compared to. On the right, you have Agaricus xanthoderma. Very easy to tell the difference. Agaricus xanthoderma smells like chemicals and turns yellow when you slice it in half longitudinally. It'll turn yellow at the base there. The next mushroom we're going to look at is the fried chicken mushroom. Do not ask me why it's called that. I have no idea. It does not taste anything like fried chickens. This is Lyophilum decastes. So, the cap is quite variable in terms of its color. It is gray to brown to yellowish brown. So that's a lot of variability there. Sometimes those colors will be streaked together, and then it is usually paler at the margin, and you can kind of see that happening here with these gray ones. They are convex, flattening out with age. When you run your finger across them, they are smooth to the touch. The margin is enrolled when young. Then these grow up to about 4 inches in diameter. One of the problems with this mushroom is its, to some extent, lack of features. Here we see some brown ones, but again, this is just any old mushroom. As a result, you can expect a lot of lookalikes. So the gills are white, yellowing with age. They are also variable, which is another problem in IDing these mushrooms. They can be adnate, adnext to decurrent. They are close together. Short gills between them are frequent, and this produces a white spore print. Not a very good example of a white spore print, but it is what I found. The stipe is off-white, becoming tan towards the base. It is cylindrical to clavate. It has a central attachment to the cap. It's quite fibrous. You can see there those longitudinal fibers, and it's up to about 4 inches high and a half-inch thick. They clump together in massive amounts, similar to what you'd expect from honey mushrooms at times. So these are saprobic. They're terrestrial. They are preferential to recently disturbed soil. So places to look for this mushroom would be relatively new paths that have been cut through a wooded area, or anywhere where there was in prior years some sort of construction going on in a wooded area, or in areas where there was a windstorm not too long ago and it knocked over some larger trees and left those kind of upturned areas as a result in the forest floor. These jostle for space. There will be massive quantities of them, and that often affects the shape of the cap as well. And then these are found in the fall, as we know. The edibility of these is choice. They are quite good to eat, but they do require long cooking times. These are for advanced mushroom pickers. So I should warn you as well, just like honey mushrooms, they are toxic if eaten raw or undercooked, and that toxicity can be quite bad. If eaten raw, these can actually damage your liver. Plus, due to that variability in color and shape, what we have here is it being potentially mistaken for some of these gray or brown mushrooms. I didn't include it here, but you could also add to this any of the poison pie mushrooms. As well, here we have Trichiloma pardonum once again, the leopard knight, Tricholomatarium, the gray knight, I believe that's called, and Entoloma sinuatum, the livid pink gill, 3 very toxic mushrooms. And this is the last mushroom that we'll be looking at here. This is the sweetbread mushroom, Clitopilus prunellus. So that cap is white to gray, and it tans with age. It is a convex cap that flattens out and becomes shallowly depressed. You can see that happening in the mushroom that we're looking at here. Now, looking down on this mushroom, at times it will be round, but more often than not, it has a completely eccentric shape to it, and we're going to look at some of those in a second. The margin is down rolled, especially when young, and then as it grows older, it becomes wavy or sometimes scalloped. And I'll show you what I mean by that as well. When younger, these have a velvety feel to them, which often disappears, leaving them smooth. And they can be quite large. They can grow up to about 5 inches in diameter. And here's a size reference for you. On the left-hand side there, looking down on the profiles, you can see that's round, but it also has that kind of very wavy margin that the Iowa call scalloped. On the right-hand side, that is not round at all. That is completely eccentric. The gills are off-white, becoming pink. They are decurrent or shallowly decurrent, like that tooth there. They are close together. Short gills are frequent between the gills, and this produces pinkish-brown spores. The stipe is white to pale pink. It is cylindrical to clavate to fusiform. You can see it there as a fusiform one there. So thickest in the middle and tapering towards each end. It has a central to eccentric off-center attachment. Often with this one, that off-center attachment will be more common than the central attachment, to be honest. The stipe is solid, and it's up to about 4 inches high and 1 inch thick. These are saprobic mushrooms. They are found in both grasslands and woodlands. So a good place to look for this would be in campgrounds where there are grassy areas, and it's in like a wooded area of the campground primarily. These are terrestrial mushrooms, scattered to gregarious, found in the fall. They are choice. They smell like flour, but they taste like kind of like a sweetened flour, and that's where the name sweetbread mushroom is coming from. And then these are for advanced mushroom pickers. Here's why. Cladocybe dealbata is on the right-hand side. Our sweetbread mushroom is on the left. So that's the sweating mushroom on the right. It contains a toxin called muscarine that can actually make you quite sick and is responsible for a number of deaths. Again, Cladocybe phylophylla on the right, Cladopilus pernulus on the left. Very toxic mushroom, has killed a number of people, Cladocybe phylophylla. And finally, once again, Entoloma sinuatum, the livid pink gill, which is a particularly easy one to confuse these with because they both have pink gills. So be familiar with both and how to tell the difference between them. Other species, Coprinus comatus would be the shaggy mane. Coprinus atramentari would be the alcoholic ink cap, Hydnum repandum, as well as any of the other toothed mushrooms. Suillus, so that would be the slippery jacks. Rapinia helveloides would be the apricot jelly. Any sort of Helvella species, so that would be the elephant saddles. Any of the chanterelles, and any sort of hygrophorous wood wax species. These would all be fall mushrooms. And yeah, that's it. So a bit of a longer presentation, but there are a lot of mushrooms that grow in the fall in Saskatchewan. And yeah, so these are for more advanced pickers. This is the Mushroom Wizard. Stay safe while you're picking, please. And I will see you next time. Have a great day.